Good evening, everyone. I'm Sqn Ldr Sargam, and I welcome you to today's edition of mindFly webinars, where we will talk about cultures in aviation. Before we begin, I would like to tell you that this webinar is being recorded in audio and video. So I request all of you to stay on mute and keep your videos off throughout the session. We encourage your questions, so I request you to type your questions in the chat box while the presentation is on or after it is over. We will try and answer as many questions as possible in the time frame available to us. And I request all of you to remain on mute throughout. We will have a presentation and that will be followed by a question and answer session. So the presentation on cultures in aviation will be given by Captain Amit Singh, who's been an aviator for 30 years. He's a fellow of the Royal Aeronautical Society. He's a safety and training expert and author of the blog mindFly. Over to you, Captain Amit.
Thank you very much, and welcome to mindFly. This is a Human Factors blog and a webinar series focusing on different aspects of aviation and connecting to everyday life, society, and culture. Today's webinar is on cultures in aviation. As you're aware that we live in a society, in a country, in a region, in a part of the world. So there are different elements which affect our behavior, the way we work. So we'll go through different segments, basically three elements: your professional culture, your national culture, and the organization culture. What are the ways to interact with each other, and how does behavior change with all these? So this presentation is about 20 minutes. Thereafter, we'll have a question and answer session, and if we have time, then short discussion. So cultures in aviation allow you to bring about your best in terms of from where you come from, combined with the organization you are in, and your professionalism. When all three combine, then what is the outcome? That will be shown to you in the presentation. So we know culture, and to begin with, a couple of accidents I'd like to highlight. First is the Air Ontario Fokker 28 in March 89, which took off in icing condition with contaminated wings. Second is the A320 in Strasbourg misselected the switch. Basically, they're confused between the flight path angle and the vertical speed. So this caused a high rate of descent. Piper Navarro crashed near South Wales while circling at night. Circling is now a special maneuver. You need special training for that. And Embraer 120 RT, which suffered an in-flight breakup. The probable cause in all the accidents was attributable to other things, but one of the causes was the organization. So this is how the organization and the culture came into investigation in aviation. What is the role that it plays in the daily life? So the failure of the operator or the management to establish a corporate culture which encouraged and enforced adherence to approved maintenance and quality procedure was one of the comments which was noted in the Embraer 120 accident, which caused the in-flight structural breakup. So now organization is also a part in the previous webinar about root cause analysis. We saw that in the fishbone, there are a number of factors, man, machine, and later on, management or the organization was also added because it has an impact on how you behave, how your SOPs are designed, how you work, your pressures on you, the stress, fatigue. So everything plays a part. And in an accident, all of these combined, and the stressor comes on as a combination of all the events. Now, we all see in everyday life, not just aviation, that we see things deteriorating in front of our eyes, nothing happens. But when something big happens, a big accident, then there's a lot of hue and cry, and things begin to change. A lot of inquiries, committees, and recommendations, and the systems are revamped, people are changed. There's a lot of learning and new developments. So it takes an accident before existing knowledge, which might have been applied proactively to prevent pain and destruction, called aviation's attention to cultural factors. Outcome-oriented professional culture demands that the system be broken before we start thinking about fixing it. So that if you're not proactive, then you're basically waiting for an outcome before you start fixing the system. Safety is a social construct and a state of mind. Safety partly rests in formal structure and protocols, but fundamentally in attitudes. So it is not that there is a safety department which will work. Safety has to be ingrained in every activity you do. That is the role of safety. But everybody is responsible. It is not just the safety department is responsible. Each individual is responsible for safety. And that is how the safety culture is built in an organization or a region. Training can exercise cultural differences. Exercise means eliminate the differences, the gaps, or help bridge the gaps or bonds so that we work in a cohesive manner. What is culture? Definition, standard. Culture consists of values, beliefs, systems of language, communication, practices that people share in common, and that can be used to define them as collective. So if we come from a region, we are from a different culture, and organization which is smaller can have a different culture, national culture. So all are pretty different in nature. Some are very rigid, whereas others can be more flexible. Culture also includes the material objects that are common to the group or society. So you could have a flag which represents the culture, or any symbol which represents a culture. So that unites people under that umbrella. Culture is distinct from social structure and economic aspects of society, but it is connected to them, both continuously informing them and being informed by them. So you cannot separate society. If you go out for work, you cannot leave your home behind. You have your thoughts, you have your values, your belief systems, which you pick up from the society or carry on from the society to work. It depends on how strong the organizational culture and professional culture is, that you do not let them outweigh the consequences, or they do not have an overbearing effect. So when you are at work, your organizational culture and professional culture should be strong, but you cannot separate the society because that has a big part to play in your behavior. Culture in the flight deck. See on the top right, mission and crew performance outcomes. So this is an interactive figure adopted from Heilmrich and Fushi. They are big thinkers in this field. The crew performance inputs. We have individual aptitudes, the physical condition, crew composition, organizational rules, the operating environment. So all these factors affect the crew performance. So we put them in separate brackets. It comes to professional culture, organizational culture, and national culture. The crew and mission performance functions are pretty different. Team formation management, the technical part, decision-making process, situational awareness. So attitudes and morale also combine. So this is a continuous loop. As I said before, when you're at work, you have a part of society with you, but you also have additionally the culture of the organization, which means this is the way you do things out here. It is not that you carry your own baggage from your previous organization or from the society, but you have to work collectively towards the organizational goal. So that is, again, a part of the professional culture, how strong you are in your belief systems as a professional. Look at professional culture. One of the defining attributes of profession is that the members have social expertise, which means you can easily differentiate a professional from a layman. A professional has, they can perform certain actions or deliver service that a layperson cannot do. They have some expertise or specialty which they have acquired through extensive training. Aviation, you have pilots, you have engineers, you have dispatchers, and the management. So everybody has a different background and expertise. They are not interchangeable, but you can adapt to them, provided you undergo this extensive training. Members typically place great value on their work and like the job. So a true professional will love his job and will place it well ahead or top in the hierarchy. There is a difference between liking a job and being happy with the organization. So as a professional, you may be a professional individual, but if you do not like the organization and the belief systems, which means you're in the wrong job, does not mean you're not a professional, but you're in the wrong place. So while choosing your organization, you have to decide, if you have a choice, that will it meet my goals, my professional goals, my individual goals? So are they in line or aligned with the organizational goals? Similarly, when an organization inducts you at the screening stage, they want to see how many goals align or commonalities. When they send you for training, an individual looks, what is in it for me? What is the value addition? How do I gain from the training? And will my manager allow me to implement what I've learned from the training? This is the primary aspect which I've seen missing in a lot of organizations. People undergo a lot of training, different courses. But once they come back, the managers say, no, we will continue doing what we're doing. That your motivation, I sent you for training. But the point is, if I learn something, I'm not able to implement it, then it is of no use. I'm not motivated. That intrinsic motivation does not come unless I am able to implement and see the change happening, which makes me feel good that I brought about the change. I feel responsible. Each individual has certain self-esteem and internalized value of professional culture. They form part of it. So everybody, basically an individual, every individual is, you can say, a king in himself. But once you join an organization, you have to work as a team. This does not mean that somebody is put down or put up based on your performance. Performance-based industry or a merit-based industry will always look up to a person who has high values and is a professional. There are certain strengths and weaknesses of professional cultures. We have seen a lot of good pilots and not so good pilots. So there are differences who work for the organization, who work as a professional and have good conceptual knowledge, which at a time of difficulty is used in various ways. Typically, two aircraft accidents are highlighted. One is the DC-10 accident, wherein they lost an engine. An engine exploded in the tail, which caused the loss of all hydraulics. So the flight controls, the aircraft turns, banks moves with the power of hydraulics. So if you lose all hydraulics, how do you turn an aircraft? So they decided to use the two wings, the engines under the wing, and differential thrust. So they decided to use their conceptual knowledge and innovate, take help from others, and they managed to land. So that was a good professional behavior wherein they explored all possibilities, whatever knowledge, they shared everything, they worked as a team. Second is DHL accident, wherein they took off from runway 15 left in Kuwait at about 8,000 feet. Aircraft was struck by a missile. The left wing was on fire, there was a fuel leak, and they lost all hydraulics. So professionals start here. So they stabilized the aircraft, basics, they recalled the principles of flying, and they came back, landed on runway, the opposite runway, 33. So this is basically true professional who have the love for the job. They acquire not just the knowledge, which is the bare minimum, but they dig in deeper to understand what really is happening, so that in the need of the hour, they are able to innovate, improvise, and find a way out. There's certain weaknesses as well in professionalism, or when you go to the top, a very thin line. So if you call yourself true professional, a lot of people fly with fatigued. They should not be flying because it endangers safety. So in order to help the organization, you might say, okay, I'm fatigued, I'll fly, but you do not understand that you're endangering the lives of people. Accidents one day, but they build up. They build up, their near misses, a couple of near misses, or maybe 1,000 near misses, then big accident happens. So whatever you have saved is lost, or more than that is lost in an accident. Nobody quantifies an accident, but the losses are much bigger. You have insured losses and uninsured losses. Uninsured losses are much bigger than insured losses. So a loss of reputation of an airline is an uninsured loss because of if a fatigued pilot is flying. So that shows the culture of the organization. If you report sick, then you're basically helping safety. But if you're sick and you're flying, if you're self-medicating and flying, then you're again compromising. So you might think that I'm a professional, that I should fly, but if you're not up to it, professionalism says that you should not fly. Captains to admit error. So you think, or when you are confident that you know the subject, then you move towards the higher part, which says that, no, I cannot make mistakes. Or you think that others will also make, only others will make mistakes. So that is when arrogance and overconfidence creeps in. That can endanger, again, the safety of the flight. Personally, you think nothing will happen to me. This considerable inertia and change requires both strong interventions and time. So once you are rigid, you have the feeling that you are, nothing can happen to you. You're not vulnerable to accidents. You cannot make errors. Then you keep on becoming more rigid, and it makes life difficult for others. So those are the weaknesses of thinking that you are professional, but you are not. A national culture, I'll give you an example. There was a Western pilot who was working in an Eastern industry, Southeast. So he came to a scheduler. He said, it's my cat's birthday on 6th of June. And please sign me an off on 6th of June. I need to celebrate my cat's birthday. The scheduler was quite busy with his work. And he heard the captain, a senior captain, and he said, yes, okay. So the party was planned. A cat's party was planned. Everybody got their cats, the friends, and everything was planned. When the roster came out, he was planned for a long layover. So everything was ruined. Question arises, what did the scheduler mean when he said yes? He said yes to the captain. Why did he not do it? In the East, it is not polite to say no, especially to a senior. So Western fat captain flying in a Southeast country. So it is not very usual or it is unusual to say no to a senior person. That's the culture. Also the occasion, a cat's birthday. So to a scheduler, he thought cat's birthday. What's wrong with the captain? Captain must be off his rockers. But if you look at it, the fact is that captain and his wife, they love the cat. So this is a true incident. And the second part is they didn't have kids. So they loved the cat and they wanted to celebrate the birthday. And it happens in other cultures, but maybe not here. In culture, Southeast country which he was working in. So for sure there was a problem which the scheduler could not understand and the captain could not convey in so many words. So a national culture needs to be understood. Hoosted, a Dutch professor, he has studied the cultures and basically segregated in power distance, individualism, masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, long-term orientation, and indulgence. So I have tried to list a few countries. If you go from west to east, typically Middle East and Asia, Southeast Asia, Saudi Arabia, we have Pakistan, India, Nepal, South Korea, China, and Singapore. So these elements are graded here. A few of them are missing, which means it has not been measured. It's not that it's not there. So let's briefly look at what it means. Power distance is basically the relationship between the two individuals or different individuals of different rank. So the dimension deals with the fact that all individuals in the society are not equal. It expresses the attitude of the culture towards these inequalities amongst us. The power distance is defined as the extent to which less powerful members of the institution and organization within a country expect and accept that power is distributed unequally. So you can have a captain, a senior captain, or a very junior co-pilot. So the power distance would be very high because of the seniority. But if you take the same cockpit in another culture with the same seniority, the power distance could be low. So that depends on the culture from where you are. Next is individualism. So the fundamental issue addressed by this dimension is the degree of interdependence a society maintains amongst its members. It has to do with whether people's self-image is defined in terms of I or we. So if we go back, I needed to show you power distance. So Saudi Arabia, the power distance is quite high. So is in South Korea, which is the highest. The society is structured such that a senior member is respected very high. But the fact is that if a senior member decides something, nobody says a no. It's all yes. So that power distance is very high. But if you go towards the West, in US, in Europe, it is very low. So next we saw individuality, I or we. So Saudi Arabia, it is low, it comes down. India, it is quite high because of we have joint families. So it is collective decision. Nepal, South Korea becomes low because power distance is very high. So the person at the top of the family or the organization decides something and the I prevails rather than we. China, it is again low, and Singapore being similar. So high score of masculine in this dimension indicates that the society will be driven by competition, achievement, and success, with success being defined by the winner, the best in the field. A value system that starts in school and continues throughout organizational life. Again, in the green, so this is quite high. Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, India, similar, Nepal, South Korea, China is pretty high, very competitive as a society, and Singapore is almost at an average, close to all. Uncertainty avoidance, the extent to which members of a culture feel threatened by ambiguous or unknown situations, have created beliefs and institutions that try to avoid these. Now look at the blue. So South Korea is the highest again. Long-term orientation, how every society has to maintain some links with its own past while dealing with challenges of present and future. So you have some tradition, history. So South Korea typically falls back to history and what the ancestors used to do. So they have a strong bond or a relationship with that. Last, indulgence. The dimension defined here is the extent to which people try to control their desires and impulses. So as per Hofstede, when he analyzed Saudi Arabia, it is quite high. India is pretty low. South Korea low. China goes even lower. Singapore is next after Saudi Arabia. So an example of a power distance, a low power distance captain meets a high power distance co-pilot. What does that mean? So for example, a Western expat captain meets a co-pilot, an ab initio co-pilot just after flying school, graduated and joined an airline, a local in South East Asia maybe. He comes up, he says, Jim, Western captain to his Eastern co-pilot who had just graduated from training. The co-pilot replied, okay, sir. No, it's just Jim. Pilot again says, okay, sir, Jim. That is within his culture that respect has to be given to the senior. So he will bite his tongue and say his name, but that respect will always come, sir. That is the power distance index, which means the co-pilot regards his senior as he regards the senior members of his family. But a low power distance means that they are very casual about it, very easygoing. If you turn it around, the same cockpit, switch roles, you have a high power distance captain and a low power distance co-pilot. So a Western co-pilot walks in casually, says hi to the captain. From maybe Southeast or from strong power distance country, he feels that this person is rude. He should address me as a captain or a sir. How can he call me by my name? So that is the culture, basically, the national culture. How do you treat people amongst your society? So when it creeps into the cockpit, it makes a lot of difference. That's why the organizational culture has to override all this. It has to define this is the way we do things here. National culture to the flight deck. National culture influences but not necessarily controls the pilot behavior. Shapes expectations about interpersonal relationships. All pilots know that they share a professional culture that overrides and transcends the influence of national culture. So we have a common language, standard operating procedures, standard callouts that overrides your what you get from the society. Because pilots deal with high-risk situations daily, they are forced to be better communicators and better team players as compared to others. So they know that once the doors are closed and they are airborne, it is the team which plays. Very little help can be gained from outside sources. So they like to communicate more and play as a team. National culture is a product of a lot of things: heritage, religion, history, the language, the climate where you live, population density, whether there are too many people or too less people, whether you're afraid of crowds or you're feeling lonely, the availability of resources, political movements, and wealth. So all these play a role in the development of a unique national characteristic. So a person coming from one part of the world can have a different combination of all these things. So that will form his national culture. Organizational culture begins with two questions. When you join an organization and you're working there, so do you think that your perceptions of your employer or organization affect your level of commitment and job performance? Because we've seen that if you're a true professional, you will work to the best of your ability. But does the organization promote that work or appreciate that good work? So that will play a role in the organizational culture and your interaction. So you may be a good professional, but are you happy in that organization? Second question is, does pride in the company or the lack thereof affects one's performance? So if you're working in a big company or a well-reputed company doing very well, will talk about the company. So when you are out in a social meeting, people ask you, which company do you work for? You name the company, they said, wow, that's a very good company. So that is a matter of pride. But it is a big company and is engaging in all the wrongful practices, even though it is big, maybe making money, but not a good name. You may be a professional, but it will affect your performance because you're not very happy in that organization since your values and beliefs do not match with the organization's values. Definition of organizational culture can vary according to the academic discipline from which they're originated. So it depends on the industry you're in the finance or engineering, production. So the organization culture definition varies on that. But overall, organizational culture can be defined as the values, beliefs, assumptions, the rituals, symbols, and behavior that define a group, especially in relation to other groups or organizations. So a strong organizational culture can affect an individual in the sense that when he comes with his personal culture or the society beliefs, a strong organizational culture can basically slot you and put you under one SP, which is uniting everybody. So typically, we've seen in airlines that a lot of people join different cultures, organization cultures and personal cultures. In India, we have seen big airlines mushrooming. So when they are growing at a fast rate, they recruit people maybe from South America, US, from Southeast Asia. And in India, you have different cultures and different companies. So the organization culture also comes in. So people come with a lot of baggage. So it depends on the organization, which has to say that this is the way we work here, and you have to shed your culture and imbibe the organization culture. But that is one thing which bonds everybody who comes from different parts of the society and different regions or national cultures. So every organization needs to invest in this, because ultimately, if you're divided or if your loyalties are still divided or the people are not convinced about your work style, they will never be loyal to you, and that they will not give 100%. Even they are good professionals, but extracting best out of an individual, the organization culture has to be very strong. There are two different layers we see. The surface is the behavior, the observable behaviors. So people from companies with strong organizational culture typically tend to behave in a certain manner. So that you can make out easily. And second is the physical manifestations such as uniform, you'll have symbols, logos, rituals, get-togethers. So those are physical manifestations. So people bond because of that, the commonality, and they tend to behave in a particular way, the common way of an organization. Organization culture is locally determined and more able to influence the national culture. National culture is covers everybody, and it is quite rigid, resistant to change. It is the organization culture which ultimately channels the effect of national and professional cultures towards standard practices. So your SOPs and standard callouts is a derivative of the organization culture. When you're building them, you have to keep that in mind. It's the organizational culture which shapes the members' attitudes towards safety and productivity. So a person be safe because he's bothered about his safety and the safety of others. So an organization is formed and people are a part of it. So safety is ingrained in you. You feel responsible for safety of yourself and others. In effect, you're working towards the common goal of organizational safety. Example is two big airlines, legacy airlines, British Airways and American Airlines. Typically, they're very conservative, financially stable, COVID of course. They're large and navy blue in their image. They're not very flashy, outgoing. In India, I can say you'll have the national carrier. And the other extreme is, for example, Southwest and Virgin Atlantic in the US. They're smaller, yet financially very successful. But they're more adventurous. They like to take risks, explore new areas, new practices. They are people-friendly. They're people-driven, organization, employee-driven, and they're very colorful. They'll have badges, or they'll have different sets of uniforms. You'll see people working in shorts and work boots. So people are engaged all the time. So they are driven not only by profits, but they are connected with the organization. It's not that British Airways, the American Airlines are not. They're different organizations. So all these four are successful and they have a strong organizational culture. You can relate to your region or from where you come from. You will see different types of organizations. Like in India, you have the national carrier, and you'll have the other low-cost airlines or the other big carriers. So the typical organizational culture is different. They work in different ways, which are not interchangeable. They have different sets of values. Contemporary corporate environment. This is based on a book, Eastern Cross-Cultural Management. And it talks about society and organizations. So organizations are a part of social climate, import values from society. Since everybody comes in from society, so you bring a part of the society into the organization. And we always try to mold things in a way which aligns both organization and society. So it's kind of blending in. But they too suffer from blind spots, shortcomings existing in the society, which is not conducive to planning and smooth functioning. So if you bring in things from the society which do not match or blend in with the organization, then you'll have issues regarding functioning and planning. So there might be a clash there. So there's a need to understand the linkages between organization and society. Instead of waiting for social changes, so a person working for the human resource or in charge of the people, so he or she will always look at where the person is coming from. Or if we go out for recruitment, do we recruit from the main cities or do we go to the tier 2 cities? So that is a part of organizational plan, that what sort of people do we want, how driven should they be, what should be the needs, how can we fulfill them. So it is both ways. How can you work for the industry or the airline, and how can the airline pay back to you, so that the mutual existence can prevail. So instead of waiting for the social changes to take place and bring about organizational changes, it is better to select critical areas within the organization which can be changed. So in the machinery, small parts can be improved and we can do some fine tuning. So they can also be a feedback. So if I go for training, behavioral training, or a specialized training, my learnings always go back home. So when I discuss things at home or I see things happening at home, I might bring about certain changes. So it is a two-way process. It is not a one-way. Society and organization, so they have a symbiotic relationship. In effect, a holistic view of life and reality leads to awareness of this linkage and integration. The work culture is made of acceptable ways of doing things in an organization over a period of time. We've seen in certain parts, especially in the Indian subcontinent and certain areas, certain other developing societies, what we call in India is chalta hai work culture, where we like to say something but do not mean or stretch it a long way. Indian social system and many other developing societies suffer from an elastic work culture where the work patterns, commitments, and assurances lack precise definitions. So the reasons, because we make commitments without considerations. So we just say, yes, okay, we will do it. We will do it in a month, or we can commit so much output or production without giving due considerations. So there are certain constraints because of which we say yes. One thing, because it is very hard to say a no. That is the most obvious. And individual goals are prioritized instead of collective or organizational goals. So I would like to promote myself rather than a collective decision to work for the company or sit in the backbench. I would like to promote myself. So that affects this chalta hai culture. Regression of trust, which means it is more likely that I will trust a person I know who's very close to me rather than a professional who's a stranger. That is a regression of trust. So a person with a keen eye for detail and who himself is an expert, likes to promote people based on merit and not just because you know somebody or Rasta, call it. That basically hampers. So a merit-based culture in an organization will promote people. So these things are very clear at the onset. People know that the chalta hai work culture doesn't work in this organization, and we need to promote others so that the collective goal is achieved. So there are different implementation strategies. What is the basic awareness of the environment that you're working in? It could be the industry that you're working in. You should know the advantages of the industry and limitations, your limitation and the limitations of the industry. Group philosophy. So the group needs to define the philosophy. So there are 4 P's: the philosophy, which means the people who founded the group or the organization have thought of something that we need the organization to form in such a way, and it should grow in one direction, or these are the values or these are the objectives. So that is the founder's thought process. And that basically trickles down to the policymakers. So based on that, the policymakers look up and see that our policies are aligning with the group philosophy. From the policies are derived the procedures. The procedures should be compliant with the policies and the philosophy. And then they have to be put into practice. So people at the grassroots level should know the philosophy if you're stuck in a place or in a situation wherein you do not know the answer and you have to make or take a decision, if you know the group philosophy and you take a decision, for example, the most common is safety, economy, efficiency. So if you have to take a decision, you will have to check that my decision, is it in compliance with the group safety policies? So am I safe? Am I efficient? Am I economic? So my decision is most likely in the correct direction and will comply with the policies. But if there is a dichotomy in policies and procedures, then of course there's a clash. So people at the top need to see that all are aligned in a way so that they work as a finely oiled machinery, performing the right norms and demonstrating the gaps. So there is no organization where there is no gap. So you need to know your limitations and the gaps, and you need to bridge them. So awareness of these is very important. Performance criteria should be set, and people should know about it. So the typical bell curve where every manager gets stuck every year, that needs to be changed. So that is the default process wherein meritorious people who do not fit in the bell curve or who could fit in the bell curve every year have to be put down just because others have to be accommodated in the bell curve. Organizational redefine and redesigning is efficiency oriented. So cut out the slack, the red tape, the bureaucracy. So if you have too many levels of managers, so it is taking much more time for a decision to come. So you have to find ways wherein certain critical processes move faster. So they might bypass certain layers, move directly, like safety is reporting directly to the CEO. Certain critical safety issues need to be reported to the board. So they go directly. They do not have to pass through operations or other bureaucratic processes. Reward and punishment, that has to be very clear. Every organization has this policy, but it is hidden under wraps. When something happens, then people take out policies and show them, look, this is what you did, and this is the punishment. So we discussed in the previous webinars about just culture, wherein everybody can make mistakes, but you need to find out the root cause. That was it a slip, a lapse, a violation, intentional violation. So basically, you can also be rewarded that you made a mistake, you found out, you highlighted the mistake that prevented a bigger accident or an incident. So you could be rewarded even though you made a slip or a lapse, but you identified something which was wrong in the system. So we've seen the Columbia, the space shuttle disasters, wherein cultures, the organizational cultures played a part, even though the engineers were not ready, but there was a pressure of cost cutting, going on time. So all those factors weighed and played a part in the disaster. Training strategy, I've spoken about this. Training is the key and the foundation. Training in the organizational behavior is the most important factor because you are basically talking in the same language then. In the aviators or the pilots concept, it is the standard callouts. So training and your relationship with the way you train and what is in it for me. So that is what needs to be connected by the people who are in charge of training. And last but not the least, lead by example. So if you have mentors or leaders in the organization, so you have to lead by example and show that this is the way it is done. So better leaders will better organizations. You have plenty of them. I'll give you two examples. One of Philippines Airlines. It was owned by a family of Spanish descent. In the 1960s, the government took it over. And after that, as usual, the airline was plundered, became financially unviable, bankrupt. Till the new regime came in. And they decided to restructure the airlines. But restructuring is difficult when you have reached a low point. A lot of airlines closed down because of mismanagement or going bankrupt. But in Philippine Airlines, the pilots decided that we have to keep the airline afloat. They committed that we will work low hours for lower wages, but we will keep on flying to keep the airlines afloat, the national airlines, Philippine Airlines. Finally, in the 1990s, they found a private investor who invested a lot of money, his personal wealth. So one reason would be that he saw that there are people who are dedicated to the organization. And second would be it is the national culture. This depicts the national culture of Philippines, that when you are in a difficult situation, then people chip in hardship, and that is the individualistic culture also. Second is from US. So this is a speech by a CEO who has just joined a company called Alcoa. This is the biggest aluminum company in USA. When he joined, that time there were a lot of accidents happening in the company. A lot of people were getting injured. A lot of workforce was they were losing a lot of man hours, and of course, financial compensation was pretty high. So the airline was the aluminum company was losing a lot of money. So in the opening speech to the shareholders, the CEO goes, "I want to talk to you about worker safety." So people started thinking that this is not the way the usual CEO would open up. Everybody normally talks about how well the company is doing, the bottom lines, the profits, losses. But this CEO says, "I want to talk to you about worker safety." Every year, numerous Alcoa workers are injured so badly that they miss a day of work. Our safety record is better than the general workforce, especially considering that our employees work with metals that are 1500 degrees, and we have machines that can rip a man's arms off. But it's not good enough. I intend to make Alcoa the safest company in America. I intend to go for zero injuries. So a shareholder asked about inventories in the aerospace division. Another asked about the company capital ratios. So the CEO replies, "I'm certain you heard me. If you want to understand how Alcoa is doing, you need to look at our workplace safety figures. If we bring our injury rates down, it won't be because of cheerleading or the nonsense you sometimes hear from other CEOs. Safety will be an indicator that we are making progress in changing our habits across the entire institution. That's how we should be judged." So if you are safe in your workplace, of course, money will come in. You have chosen good professionals, you're cutting down losses. So safety will not make you profits, but safety will prevent losses. That is what most airlines, aviation organizations miss out. They do not quantify their losses. I was looking at a report of an airline which was showing the fuel saving figures. So 2,100 tons of fuel saved in a year, amounting to X amount of money. So I thought that is quite a huge sum they've saved. They must be very profitable. Surprisingly, they did not mention at the same place. So I decided to dig in a bit deeper. I just searched for the number of accidents in that particular year. What I thought was surprising. They had 2 runway excursions, which means the aircraft went out of the runway, substantial damage. And they had a few tail strikes, again, quite a lot of damage. So a lot of it is insured, but what is uninsured is people said, "Oh, this airline is not safe." because of the accidents. So while the airline was gloating about fuel saving and the numbers, mindset on the other side, they were losing money. So there was a connection which the managers could not relate. So if you're saving fuel, you have to do a cost benefit analysis or the safety assessment. Are we able to take the risk or not? Will the risk affect our workforce? Because safety is not very concerned about the bottom lines. They have to balance between productivity and the finances, which means too much of safety will lead to bankruptcy, production will go down. Too much of production will compromise safety, which we see in our daily life, wherein operations takes the leading role and puts the safety in the back seat. But once an accident happens, of course, everybody points the finger at safety. What was safety doing? So it is a strong safety culture in the country, region, or the organization, which should prevail, and which is at the top of the ladder, which is called the generative safety culture, or a proactive, which is the next in line. But the bottommost is a pathological or a reactive culture wherein people hide things, do not report. But when it blows out of proportion. A lot of airlines have closed down because of this. Pana closed down because of an accident. Of course, the secondary issues were financial. But there are other airlines organizations which have closed down, wherein after the accident, a lot of wrong practices, malpractices were discovered. So that is about cultures in aviation. So if I can conclude, I can say that consideration of cultural issues should be an integral part of design technology when you're designing an organization or a machinery or an aircraft. You have to think about the cultural issues. It should be an integral consideration during design of SOPs. So who's going to use it? Where are they coming from? How comfortable will they be? Cultural factors should be routinely considered during safety investigation process. So our investigation tends to be too technical. Human factors and cultures do not figure much in the investigations. And we don't learn. And they keep occurring again and again because we are only bothered about the technical part. That this particular instrument caused the fault or the human failed. But what exactly caused the human to fail, we don't dig that far. A general tendency to move towards Western ways of doing things, which is primarily for economical survival. So the West has a different culture. Their power distance index is different. Other factors are different, and they're more economically driven. Whereas culture, if we move towards Asia, Southeast Asia, they have a strong work culture. Even the biggest example is how Boeing company invited the Japanese managers for their floor shop management and the just-in-time culture. So Boeing had a lot of inventory stocked up in the organization, in the workplace, which was leading to a loss, which means if you do not utilize or want this particular equipment, where do you have it stocked? The Japanese introduced just-in-time, wherein you design a process and say, when I reach this particular place, I need this part. So that part should arrive a day before or something. So that management, floor shop management was introduced. Of course, Japanese management and Southeast part is known for this. So we have to adapt to our national cultures. The local cultures need to be incorporated to get in line with attitudes and values of the system. So people have their attitudes and values. You cannot purchase a system off the shelf and then thrust it on people to use. So they will find it difficult. They will find the shape odd, or maybe the color odd, or the way it works. So there could be n number of things unless you do a proper analysis before incorporating all these things. So with this, I conclude this session of the webinar. You have the mindFly blog, the Twitter account, all the videos are uploaded on mindFly YouTube. Facebook, and that's the email ID. We can take some questions and maybe a short discussion. I'll hand it over to Sargam. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Amit. So before we take on questions, I would like to ask you something about the CRM studies that we see. They're mostly done by the Westerners or the Europeans. So there is nothing that is done by the Indians or the Asians, and we try to adapt to that culture. So what do you think we can do in terms of including our culture or studying our culture?
Culture is the source. So when we come out to join a workforce, we have grown up in the society or studied in a school. Our belief systems are very strong. So you join an organization wherein things move very differently, but they should be close to from where you come from. It should not be drastically different. Otherwise, you'll have to shed a lot of things what you normally do in day-to-day life. Of course, if Asian moves to the Western countries, a lot of people migrate. So of course, there's a lot of time it takes for them to get used to the value system, the way people behave, and the way people work. So if you develop your own system, it is best to either pick up the good things from the West and incorporate in what you're already doing, or build your own system. So people like in Asia or in India, they have a very strong educational system, the traditional systems. So traditional systems can be brought about, but if you pick up something off the shelf, so then that it takes a lot of time for you to integrate. So CRM is one particular thing which is very peculiar, because it started off with a very simple background that people need to communicate and be able to work in a team. Over a period of time, you have different generations of CRM, and you started introducing different terms or terminologies, concepts. Ultimately, a beginner when he joins a CRM class is overwhelmed by the concept. So the way you teach a person is very close to your basic, the foundation level, and he has to associate with your day-to-day life. But if you pick it up from off the shelf from a Western country, you cannot associate. So you don't learn. You learn by stories. What you associate with people. So you have to build your own system, then integrate the good part.
Right. Which, I mean, the same can be said for company SOPs, where we were talking about, where you have people from other companies and other airlines also joining in. Even that is a culture difference, right?
So when you have people coming in from different organizations, they carry baggage. So their baggage. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of people come with their baggage from or their own SOPs or the previous company's SOPs. So it is important when you join an organization that integration has to be there. This is the corporate culture. This is the way we do things here. How we behave, how we talk to each other, the way we dress. So those are certain things which have to be imbibed in the beginning, or the cultural induction. I'm not sure if any airlines does that, but I've seen it in the Middle East very clear that this is the way we dress here. This is the way we talk. So that is the organization culture, and they're very clear about it, and which is in line with their national culture. So a strong national organization culture will automatically percolate down to the individual wherever he comes from. So they know these are acceptable behaviors, unacceptable behaviors. So it is not very difficult for people to adopt. But if there is nothing, no guidelines, then people are all over the place doing their own things.
Yeah. It needs to be reinforced continuously.
Yep.
And also talking about rewards and punishments, we hear a lot about punishments, but not about enough rewards. So what do you think we can do about that?
Punishments are basically a short-term reactive measure. So, of course, punishment is also required. But if we look at the just culture matrix we saw in the previous webinar, root cause analysis,
Yes.
if somebody does a mistake, an honest mistake, so the company first looks inwards that, okay, it was a mistake, a slip, or lapse. So why did that happen? Was there something in our SOP that made it happen, or our policies, or somebody from within? So you have to look from within. If you find anything, if you don't find, then you ask the person what happened, and you have to query. If it is something small, okay, you can counsel a person. If it becomes something bigger, then again you see your SOPs. If it is repetitive or a large number of people are doing, you say, okay, there's something with our SOP. Let's try to modify the SOP. But if you find that somebody is doing an action which is unacceptable deliberately, which is causing harm, then of course, even though you have just culture, but you still have to take action or take punitive action, which is punishment. Punishment also serves uh, as a measure which shows people that yes, this is the line between unacceptable and acceptable behavior. So that is demonstrating that we are good so long it doesn't harm others and the company. That should be very clear what is acceptable and not acceptable. So rewards are promoting people for good behavior. Like I said, if you find a chink in the armory, you highlighted, even though you stumbled upon it or made a mistake and found it, but you still highlighted. That is good reporting culture. So that's a good work culture. So you should be rewarded for that.
Right. Now, getting to the questions, we have Gurmukh who wants to know about accidents and whether there is a certain behavior or parameters that we can use to monitor the chain of events.
In the last webinar, root cause analysis, we saw that it is not just the pilot. Pilot is one of the contributory factors. Unfortunately, the pilot is the first one to reach the site of the accident because he himself is involved. But there would be a lot many other contributory factors like the machine, the interfaces, the SOP, the management, your recruitment. Are you recruiting the right person, the right attitude? Have you trained him properly? Are the SOPs conducive to the operating environment? So you have to put down all these factors on the drawing board and then analyze. So rather than doing just a technical analysis, you have to do a cultural, human factor, and technical analysis altogether. So it is typical. For example, if you're sitting in your house and there's a glass of water kept on the side, somebody walks, brushes, and it falls. The glass breaks, water spills. So what is your first reaction? So it could be that what have you done? Which means you see losses and you see that the person has done something wrong. You want to punish the person. On the other side, if you analyze that, yes, the glass was placed in the wrong place in the corner of the table, and it is quite possible that anybody walking could brush along the glass, and it is likely to fall and break, cause losses. So then you analyze that what happened? Why didn't I pick it up? Or why did the system not pick up this issue? So if you have an airline accident, you have to analyze that, okay, you found the cause. Why was it not picked up? Why was the system not proactive? Why is it always reactive? So that is what you need to analyze so that next time it doesn't happen. Most of the time we see that the case is closed. Probable cause is just 2 lines. Okay, the proper procedure was not followed. So why did the pilot not follow the procedures? Or why do pilots or engineers uh, tend not to follow procedures? Maybe because that particular SOP has been made by someone higher up who's not in active flying. So he does not know the challenges of that, or the peculiarity of the place or the operating procedure. So that root cause analysis is very important. That gives out the causes, number of causes.
Right. And that would probably help in reducing a lot of other future incidents.
Yeah.
It's always a chain of events. So like he says, he wants to know whether an accident is predictable. So
Predictable, yes. So an investigation is basically a reactive measure. Something has happened and you want to know what has happened, that next time it doesn't happen. So second measure is you look at the flight data or any data analysis. You have to identify trends. So it is not one of things. You identify a trend if something is going off the normal. It happens. You come out for training, out of training, because training is done in a controlled environment. So you are trained, you have the SOP, very limited variables. When you go live or you're flying, the number of variables change. They compound. There can be huge number of variables, the ATC, the weather, you have birds, you have other traffic, you have your crew, you have passengers, so many things, which is not there collectively in the training arena. So things suddenly change. So you have to cater for all those things. So analysis is very important. So you pick up a trend. So trend analysis you picked up. So is there a need to retrain people or revise a procedure? So that is why we have periodic training, 6 months or every year, so that we are corrected. We come back to the or closer to the ideal position and start off that. Slowly there is some attrition or some deviation. Again, you're corrected. So it is not that a person who is a professional will never deviate. You will make errors. There are other pressures of maybe society or organizational pressure, time pressure. So that creates that gap or the deviation. So it has to be periodically done. Prediction is that is the next level. That is big data. Using big data, you can predict an incident, accident, but that is at a very higher level. But at a medium level, you can use your flight data and see that, identify a particular set of people or one particular person who is regularly or sitting on the edge. He's always on the edge, which means he is likely to cross at any stage. So you have to correct that person or the SOP.
right. So we have Sheikh Zafar Iqbal, who had asked, how can we teach culture to newcomers in the company coming from different parts of the world? I think we covered that, but in case you would like to add something more.
So cultures, basically, you have to, it works both ways. You work in a multicultural organization, so you have to cater for the fact that there will be people who are coming from other regions with other cultural backgrounds. So what is acceptable, what is not acceptable? So that has to be defined and laid out in the beginning. So normally what happens, people are in a hurry to recruit a growing airline. So, okay, get online. Later on, you start seeing problems. Problems as in people are behaving or talking to people differently, because it is not that they are such, but it is their national culture. So they have not been sensitized. So I worked with an organization wherein we used to talk to people and we used to gather which part of the globe they're coming from, and they will face these peculiarities, which means a lot of people in Southeast Asia, they do not point at another person. So that is considered being rude. So either they will point the thumb or they will point their nose. So they never point the finger. So it has to be understood both ways, because another crew who is flying with this person will not understand or look at the direction which the crew wants to. So either you say this is the SOP and this is what you will do, or you will try to understand and it's a midway. So that sensitization is more important. It is not that you have to enforce. You have to make people sensitive that there will be issues, but you cannot have a clear definition of everything.
Right. I think we need to wrap up now, Captain Amit. Any comments that we would like to take from anyone that you feel, or? Okay, we have one more question from Airy. I mean, Airy 2004 is the name that is coming there. Who says, how do we tackle a huge cultural shift within an organization due to an influx of recruits? I think it's the same as you covered just now. Yeah, sensitized.
Or it could be, another thing could be a change of ownership. So you're working in an organization and there's a change of ownership. The new owners would have different set of values. So either the new owners say that, okay, you continue to work this way, or everybody shifts. So that is a challenge. So for example, if say the national carrier, or in India, if Air India is privatized, so that will be a huge shift in the cultural values, which means things are totally different in private organizations. So how will people cope with it? So that is one of the biggest challenges. It is not the books or the company balance sheet which has to move on, but it is the people. How will they deal with it? Deal with the cultural shift which they are used to for the past 30 or 40 years. That is the biggest challenge.
What are we talking about next week then, next Saturday?
If you have any suggestions, you're most welcome. Otherwise, I will try to cover a few investigations, typical investigations, interesting topics, or some alarming investigations wherein we can highlight the drawbacks of an investigator. Normally, we assume that investigation is complete and that is the end. But there could be drawbacks in the investigative process. And we can see wherein there was a shortfall or shortcoming in the cultural aspects, the organizational behavior, the individuals' biases which have come in during the investigation. So these are all the learnings we can have. Normally, we read a report and we say, okay, this is what has happened, and we assume that it is correct. But a lot of times, individual biases come in, or shortcomings. People do investigations in a hurry, or different parts of the country or nations, they do it differently. So I'll try to pick up a few investigations wherein all these things will be highlighted, make it more interesting.
Okay, we are getting some more suggestions where Gurmukh says, can we talk about future technology or post-COVID flying, post-COVID aircraft, which I feel is talking about how flying is going to be post-COVID.
We can talk about artificial intelligence in training, or artificial intelligence in flying, as in the role of a co-pilot first. We already have artificial intelligence, like in all the computers we deal with. Your email, it is sorted out based on the pattern in which you work. The email provider automatically sorts it out. The importance levels in training, it has been introduced in US in the Air Force, wherein the role of the instructor is now diminished. Yeah. Because the instructor is normally sitting behind, the instructor doesn't know where the trainee is looking and how much input the trainee is given. So with the use of artificial intelligence, you can have a real-time feedback. If you're doing a steep turn, if you're not giving enough bank, or if rudder is required, giving less rudder, immediately the artificial intelligence will pick it up and give you an input that you need to correct on this. And similarly, a feedback to the trainer that this is the level of performance. So that is the future of technology, artificial intelligence. We have seen initially we had 3 people in the flight deck with the flight engineer. Slowly the flight engineer was phased out. So who can say maybe the co-pilot is phased out, you have a captain and artificial intelligence, and later on totally unmanned. So people are apprehensive, but that is the future. It is better that we adapt to it. because we were quite late in adapting to automation. So automation went ahead and humans basically regressed. They were not in line or tandem with the leaps and bounds at which automation grew. So this time we have to be at par with artificial intelligence, because that is another person in the cockpit. It is not in physical form, but they can be moody. Automation can be moody. Automation has a behavior, typical behavior. You have to reset computers. You have to work with them softly, or you have to at times tap them, bang them. So they are another person who is quite moody also. So it is how you behave. Behavior of human performance with artificial intelligence is important.
That's something you could cover one of these Saturdays, probably, maybe next to
Yes.
next Saturday.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So I think we should wrap up now. If you all have any more questions, you can write into Captain Amit. You have those various platforms where you can get in touch with him and he can clear your doubts. So to sum up, I'd like to say that in order to manage a flight safely and efficiently, the requirement of crew cooperation should be clearly defined, and every crew member should have the same concept of the desired behaviors, and that will happen only through training, continuously practicing it, assessing that behavior, and reinforcing it throughout all the levels of the company, not just the crew. The whole company's culture matters. Right, so I thank all of you for joining us today, and we hope to see you all next Saturday at 5 p.m. Thank you so much, Captain Amit. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Sir.
Thank you.
Very good session.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.